Just a week before his wedding, Adam decided to skip his last work call of the day and head home early, hoping to get a head start on honeymoon plans. As he opened the front door, he was greeted by the sight of his fiancée, Abigail, dressed to the nines. She wore a sleek black cocktail dress, a delicate string of pearls, sheer black stockings, and high heels that only added to her elegance. "Wow, she looks incredible," he thought, momentarily stunned. "You're home early," Abigail said, her voice high-pitched and strained. The tension in her tone hinted at the nerves churning beneath her composed appearance, as though her carefully laid plans were beginning to unravel. Adam's first thought was that he must have forgotten some dinner plans. Smiling warmly, he leaned in, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "Give me 10 minutes to shave, and I'll be ready to go." Her response caught him off guard. "Go where?" she asked, her voice shaky as the words left her lips. Adam froze mid-step. "With you, of course," he said, his brow furrowing. "I mean, you're all dressed up for something." There was a long, uncomfortable pause before Abigail finally replied, "Honey, I'm sorry. You're misunderstanding." She hesitated, biting her lip. Oh God, I've been dreading this. I was planning to leave you a note explaining everything." Adam's confusion only deepened as he glanced toward the front door and noticed an overnight bag sitting neatly by her side. Abigail followed his gaze and quickly added, "I'm not going to be home this weekend." "What do you mean you won't be home?" he asked, his tone sharpening. I'm so stressed from all the wedding planning," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need some time to get away." Adam's eyes narrowed. "And where exactly are you going to get away?" "A hotel downtown," she replied. "All alone?" he pressed. Her hesitation this time was more telling than words. After a long pause, she admitted softly, "No. I'll be with a friend." Adam's jaw tightened, and he inhaled deeply, trying to maintain his composure. "Since you haven't named this so-called friend, should I go ahead and assume it's a man?" The guilty look on Abigail's face said it all. "It's not like that," she stammered. "He's just a friend." Adam's voice rose, his frustration spilling over. "So, let me get this straight. You're planning to spend the weekend, just 1 week before our wedding, sharing a hotel room with another man, and I'm supposed to believe he's just a friend?" "I need this," she pleaded, her voice quivering. I need this weekend." "And who is this friend of yours?" he demanded, his voice filling the room. "Who's the guy that's going to be sharing your bed?" "It's not like that," she cried. "He's someone I've been talking to." "Talking to about what?" Adam asked, his words sharp and cutting. "About us, our relationship," she admitted. His eyes narrowed. "Is he a therapist? A counselor?" Abigail looked at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. "Is he part of the clergy, maybe? Someone who counsels couples before marriage?" Adam pressed, his patience wearing thin. "No," she mumbled. "But he's a good listener." Adam exploded. "A good listener? That's your excuse? You're going to spend the weekend with some guy just because he's a good listener?" Abigail's posture crumpled. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked as though she wanted to melt into the floor. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Adam barked. He waited until she finally raised her tear-streaked face. Her mascara was running in streaks, and her sobs filled the silent room. 2 hours of careful preparation had unraveled in less than 2 minutes. "I'm going to ask you one last time," Adam said, his voice dangerously low. "Who is this bastard? Promise me you won't hurt him," Abigail begged, her voice barely audible. "I promise I'll find out who he is and then kill him if you go through with this." "That's the only promise you're getting," Adam shot back. Abigail collapsed to the floor, curling up like a scolded dog. "This is why I was going to turn my phone off and leave you a note," she whispered. "I couldn't face this. Adam's expression hardened. So, if I hadn't come home early, you'd be gone already? Abigail nodded, her silent confirmation cutting him like a knife. Fighting to keep control, Adam reached for his briefcase, pulled out a legal pad and pen, and slammed them onto the dining room table. Dragging out a chair, he sat down and glared at her. "This better be one hell of a note," he said coldly. "Start writing," Adam said firmly. Abigail hesitated for a moment before sitting down at the table. With trembling hands, she began to scribble on the pad. A few minutes later, she stopped and set the pen down. Adam waited, watching closely to see if she would continue. When it became clear she wasn't going to write any more, he snatched the pad away from her. Scanning the page, his eyes widened in disbelief. She had written just one sentence: "Next week, I start a new chapter of my life, and I have to do this before it is too late." His voice quivered as he looked at her. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Were you planning to admit you were leaving with another man?" "If I had more time, I would have explained my feelings," she replied weakly. "You didn't answer my question," Adam shot back. "I would have tried to phrase it in a way that made you see this was for us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To make our marriage stronger." Adam stared at her, incredulous. "That's insane. It doesn't make any sense. How is you having an affair supposed to make our marriage stronger?" He didn't wait for her to respond. "People don't fix their relationships by cheating. Marriages end because of affairs. So do engagements." The weight of his words hit Abigail like a slap. It had never crossed her mind that Adam might actually call off their wedding because of this. Desperately searching for a way to justify her actions, she finally blurted out, "I couldn't tell you because I knew you'd react badly." "Badly?" Adam repeated, his voice rising. The word seemed to flip a switch in him. "Badly? What the hell do you mean, badly?" His tone turned sharper, angrier. "You don't know the first thing about reacting badly. Let me show you badly." Taking a deep breath, he added, "This is your last chance. I won't marry you next week, or ever, unless you tell me his name right now. The wedding is off. How's that for badly?" Abigail grabbed his wrists, her eyes pleading. "Adam, please don't say that. I love you more than anything, but this is something I have to do." He pulled free from her grasp. "Give me his name," he demanded. She remained silent. "You've got one last chance," Adam said coldly. "Tell me his name, or get out of my house and don't come back." "Adam, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I love you." "You have a twisted way of showing it," he snapped. Walking to the front door, he yanked it open. "This is the last time I'm saying this. Tell me his name, or get the hell out." Finally, Abigail broke down. In a voice barely audible, she whispered, "James. James Jenkins from work." Adam froze. His jaw tightened as the name registered. "Your boss. That son of a bitch is older than your father," he shouted. Abigail began wailing uncontrollably, her cries echoing through the room like a banshee clawing its way out of hell. Adam's face contorted with rage. "Have you been with him already?" he demanded. Abigail looked down at her feet, saying nothing. "I asked you a question." Adam roared. "Have you been with him already?" Still, there was no response. He took a step closer, his voice like thunder. "Have you slept with him?" Abigail buried her face in her hands. Her silence spoke volumes, but Adam pressed on. "Even though you're saying nothing, your silence screams louder than words ever could. I'll ask one last time, have you been with him?" Finally, she nodded. That simple gesture struck Adam like a sledgehammer to the chest. His heart pounded so violently he thought it might give out. Feeling lightheaded, he grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. Abigail stood frozen, watching him nervously, unsure of what to do or say. Taking a few deep breaths, Adam steadied his voice enough to speak. If I remember correctly, your boss is married. So what does his wife think about him running around with a blonde half her age? She knows, Abigail said softly. She's okay with it. Adam's brow furrowed. She's okay with it? Are you kidding me? She's going through menopause, Abigail explained, her words tumbling out quickly. She hasn't been able to be intimate for almost a year. Did she tell you that? Adam asked sharply. No, she admitted, James told me. He said she's too embarrassed to talk about it. Adam's voice was heavy with disbelief. Why don't we call her and ask? No. Abigail said quickly. James said it would humiliate her even more. Adam let out a bitter laugh. Give me your phone. I'm willing to take that chance. I don't have his home number, she said. Only his cell. Of course, you do, Adam sneered. Because the bastard's sneaking around behind her back. No. Abigail insisted. He respects her feelings and doesn't want to make her feel less of a woman. Adam shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe how stupid you sound defending him. I've had enough. Here's your choice, leave on your own or get thrown out on your cheating ass. Her expression darkened, and her voice rose. How dare you call me that? What would you call an engaged woman who has an affair with a married man? Adam asked, his voice cold and cutting. Abigail didn't answer. Instead, she turned away, muttering something under her breath that he couldn't quite make out. I have one more question before you leave, Adam said, his tone unwavering. Why were you planning to spend the weekend with another man? She hesitated before finally responding, this is all your fault, you know. My fault? Adam's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. What the hell are you talking about? When we started getting serious, you told me you'd been intimate with 3 women before me, she began, her voice trembling. You were the only man I'd ever been with. At the time, I told you it didn't matter, but after talking to James, it started eating at me. I realized that eventually, I'd need to cheat on you to even the score. Adam stared at her, his jaw tightening. So let me get this straight. Your boss, an older married man, convinced you that cheating on me was necessary? It wasn't like that, she snapped. James said if our marriage was going to succeed, we needed to enter it as equals. He told me I had to do this now because you always said you'd never stay married to a woman who cheated on you. Since we're not married yet, this was my chance to make things right before we tied the knot. That way, I'd never feel the need to cheat once we're married. Adam's mouth fell open, a mix of anger and disbelief written all over his face. What? Are you out of your damn mind? That was years ago, before I even met you. Since our first date, I've been 100% faithful. And now, you're staking our entire future on some garbage fed to you by a sleazy old man who just wanted a young woman in his bed? Abigail shook her head, her voice defensive. No, you don't understand. Yes, we talked about it, but he didn't manipulate me. He helped me see how unfair this was to me. He wanted me to be happy, for us to start fresh. Adam let out a bitter laugh. So it never crossed your mind that he might have a vested interest in you evening the score? No. It wasn't like that, she insisted. James only wanted to help. Help? Adam scoffed. Okay, humor me. What pearls of wisdom did this good listener offer that were supposed to help us? Abigail hesitated before answering. He didn't say much, he just helped me work through my feelings. He made me realize that I deserved to have intimacy with 3 men before we got married, so we'd be equals. Deserved? Adam repeated, his voice rising. That is the most ridiculous, self-serving nonsense I've ever heard. Abigail foolishly smirked, as though she'd just delivered a winning argument. Adam, I enjoyed being with another man, she said, but I love you so much that I'm willing to settle for one. Adam froze, staring at her in disbelief. Settle for one? He echoed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. If this wasn't so pathetic, I'd laugh. Abigail's smirk faded as she stammered, it all made sense when James explained it, it wasn't supposed to be like this. You're right, Adam said, his voice cold and sharp. It was supposed to be you and me, together forever, faithful to each other. So tell me, what exactly did you think was going to happen when I found out you'd been sleeping with your boss? You're twisting this all around, she cried. It's not what you think. Adam leaned closer, his eyes blazing. Then explain it to me. What did you expect to happen when you came back from your little weekend getaway? Did you think I'd just play the role of the good little husband and thank your boss for helping my fiancée? No, she exclaimed. I hoped you'd never find out. I love you, I never wanted to hurt you. It was supposed to be my little secret. Tucked away forever. Adam looked at her like she'd just confessed to being the village idiot. Your little secret, he said, his voice laced with disbelief. You thought you could just turn off your phone, disappear for the weekend, and I wouldn't figure out you'd been unfaithful? Abigail pressed on, oblivious to how ridiculous she sounded. Even if you did find out, I knew you loved me enough to understand it was fair. And then we'd get married and live happily ever after. Adam's voice dropped, but the rage in his words was unmistakable. Fair. What part of anything you know about me would make you believe I'd still marry you after you cheated? Abigail tried to interject, Jamesy said. Don't you dare say his name again. Adam roared, cutting her off. Jamesy. He's a manipulative opportunist who took advantage of a naive woman. No. Abigail shouted back. He's a caring man who just wanted to help our marriage succeed. Adam's eyes narrowed. How many times have you been with him, or anyone else? I swear, there's been no one else, she said quickly. Then how many times have you been with him? Adam asked through gritted teeth. Abigail hesitated, her voice barely audible. Not that many, 7 or 8. Adam's face contorted in disbelief. 7 or 8 times, he repeated. You've been with another man 7 or 8 times while we were engaged, and you think that's not that many? Abigail broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but Adam's gaze remained fixed on her, his disgust evident. I did it for us, Abigail cried, her voice breaking. To make our marriage work. Adam stared at her, his expression dark and unyielding. You think this was for us? Let's revisit that conversation, the one where you claim I told you I wasn't a virgin. I never said I'd been with 3 different women. What I said was that I'd been intimate 3 times. And every one of those times was with Megan McDonough, the girl I was dating before I met you. Abigail's face turned pale as Adam continued. Megan and I were planning to run away together after graduation, but that plan ended the day her mother caught us. You know how that story ends, her family packed up and left town the very next day. I never saw or heard from her again. A month later, I met you. And since the day we started dating, I haven't so much as kissed another woman, let alone slept with one. Abigail's stomach churned, her expression twisting with guilt. So now you're ahead 7 or 8 to 3, Adam said bitterly. I guess, by your logic, that means I'm entitled to sleep with 4 or 5 other women to even the score. Right? No. That's not what I meant, Abigail stammered. Adam's tone turned mocking. Maybe your friend Sophia, since you've always said you didn't trust her around me. Or maybe your sister, she's single, isn't she? Adam, no. Please don't say that, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Why not? Adam snapped. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't. Abigail clasped her hands together as if in prayer. I'll end it with James. I won't go away with him this weekend. Please, you have to understand, I made a mistake, but I did it for us. Adam's eyes blazed with fury. No, Abigail. You did it for you. This was never about us. It was about you and what you wanted. Please, Adam, she begged, her voice desperate. Give me another chance. I swear, I'll never. Adam raised his hand, cutting her off. The sharp gesture silenced her instantly. You're 8 times too late for that. I could never trust you again. Abigail fell to her knees. Please. I love you. I swear I'll never cheat again, she sobbed. Adam's voice dropped, heavy with pain. What hurts more than your betrayal is that you didn't come to me when you were having doubts. Me, the man you claim to love. I don't know what I would have said or done, but I can promise you this, I wouldn't have told you to have an affair with a married man. Only someone who wrecks marriages would think that was a solution. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't peaceful. Abigail could feel the weight of his words, as if they were pulling her heart out of her chest. She struggled to breathe, the taste of bile rising in her throat. Adam's expression darkened further. What do you think your mother will call you when I tell her why we're not getting married? She'll know you weren't just sampling wedding cakes, you were out auditioning men. And not just any man, but an old, married man. Abigail screamed, no. Her voice cracked under the strain. Please, Adam, don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything. But Adam's decision was made. Everyone will know what you did, he said coldly. Our families. Our friends. They'll all know we're not getting married because you had an affair. He reached for her left hand and yanked the engagement ring off her finger so forcefully it nearly tore her skin. No. That's mine. Abigail shrieked, flailing her arms in a desperate attempt to get it back. Adam clenched the ring in his fist, his voice shaking with anger. You betrayed us. You betrayed everything this ring stood for. It's over. I can't marry you. Please, leave now before I hurt you. The finality of his words struck Abigail like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, a guttural, choking sound escaped her, like the last breath of a dying man. Her body trembled violently, her eyes wide with shock. The room fell eerily quiet. Tears streamed down Adam's face as he whispered, I haven't felt this kind of pain since my dad died. Abigail's mind raced, desperately searching for the right words to save her future. But nothing came. For the first time, she realized she had been played. The silence was shattered by a sharp knock at the door. Abigail froze, her eyes darting toward the sound. Her voice was barely audible as she said, Oh my God, that's James. I'll tell him to leave. Please don't cause any trouble. Adam didn't respond. He reached for the baseball bat he kept by the door, gripping it tightly. His voice was calm but menacing as he said, I'm not going to cause trouble. I'm going to kill him right here in the foyer, and you're going to watch, Adam said, gripping the baseball bat with white-knuckled fury. Abigail leaped to her feet, panic flooding her face. Adam, stop. He's not worth it, you don't want to go to jail for this. I don't care, Adam shot back coldly, stepping around her. I've got nothing left to live for. But if I kill him, at least the pain he caused me will be paid back in full. Desperate, Abigail pulled out her phone, frantically trying to warn James. The call went straight to voicemail, sending another wave of terror through her. Adam swung the door open, the bat ready in his hand. His eyes were filled with a dark resolve, ready to strike the man who had ruined his life. But instead of James, he came face to face with 2 police officers. Adam's grip loosened, and the bat slipped from his hand, hitting the tile floor with a loud crack. The officers ignored the sound. Excuse me, ma'am, one officer said, his eyes settling on Abigail. Are you Abigail Bradley? Abigail blinked in confusion, her voice shaky. Yes. What's the problem, officer? The officer stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Do you know a Mrs. Linda Jenkins?" I work for her husband, James," Abigail stammered. The two officers exchanged a knowing look, as if sharing a private joke. "Is everything all right? Did something happen to Linda?" she asked, her voice rising. The officer's tone was steady but firm. "No, ma'am. But about an hour ago, Mrs. Jenkins shot and killed her husband in the living room of their home." Abigail's face turned ghostly white, and before Adam could react, she fainted, collapsing to the floor with a heavy thud. Adam walked to the kitchen, grabbed the largest pot he could find, and filled it with cold water. Returning to the foyer, he unceremoniously dumped it over Abigail's head. Her once perfectly styled hair now clung to her face, dripping like a drowned rat. It took a couple of minutes before she could speak. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "Oh my God. James E. is dead." The officer nodded grimly. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Jenkins shot him 6 times in the chest with a .38 caliber revolver. Then she reloaded and shot him 6 more times, point blank in the face. According to the detectives, it was the most cold-blooded thing they've ever seen. Nearly took his head clean off." The room went silent, except for the sound of Adam laughing. The officers turned to him, their expressions a mix of confusion and unease. "I guess she didn't give her husband permission to go away with you this weekend after all," Adam said, his laughter cold and bitter. One officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need you to come down to the station. Mrs. Jenkins told a neighbor she was planning to kill you for destroying her marriage. We've got several patrols combing the neighborhood, but you'd be safer downtown." Abigail's face went pale and lifeless, her expression catatonic. "Don't come back," Adam said, his voice trailing off. "You cheating woman." His words hit her like a blow, and she let out a horrific scream. The officers half-carried her out to their patrol car. Adam stood in the doorway, watching the blue lights fade into the distance as a strange calm washed over him. He went back inside, poured himself 3 stiff shots of Jack Daniels, and knocked them back one after the other. By the 4th shot, his tongue had loosened, and so had his resolve. Fueled by anger and alcohol, Adam grabbed Abigail's laptop and started typing. He titled the email, "Why I Won't Be Marrying Abigail Bradley, the Cheating Woman." The message read: "If you tune into the news tonight, you'll hear about a middle-aged woman who murdered her husband for being with a 25-year-old cheating woman. That cheating woman is my ex-fiancée, Abigail Bradley. Yes, little Miss Prim and Proper, who always looked down on her friends for sleeping around, is the reason a 60-year-old man got shot dead. And yes, that man was older than her father. Now you know why I'm not getting married. Thank God I dodged the bullet, because once a cheat, always a cheat. P.S. The police are hiding Abigail because her lover's widow is out looking to kill her. Personally, I hope she succeeds." Adam hit send, watching as the email went out to everyone Abigail had ever been in contact with, family, friends, co-workers, even her church choir. Within minutes, replies began flooding in. His phone buzzed non-stop with incoming messages and calls. The first call was from a local newspaper. They wanted an interview. Adam agreed without hesitation and even sent them a couple of pictures of Abigail in a skimpy bikini to accompany the story. Then the local radio station called, asking if he'd share his story on the air. Adam spent the next several hours fielding calls, answering emails, and relishing the small taste of justice his public humiliation of Abigail provided. Most of the responses Adam received were overwhelmingly supportive, even from Abigail's own friends and family. After hours of retelling the same story, he decided to take a break. Fueled by a lingering sense of betrayal, he began stuffing all of Abigail's belongings into heavy-duty garbage bags. By the time he was done, 4 bulging bags sat at the curb near his garbage cans. The next morning, chaos erupted in Adam's quiet neighborhood. The local newspaper, in a town where a murder hadn't occurred in over 5 years, ran a front-page headline, "Love Triangle Ends in Death." The TV stations weren't far behind, descending on his suburban cul-de-sac to cover the sensational story. Every broadcast led with photos of the fugitive Linda Jenkins, Adam's ex-fiancée in a bikini, and the now-deceased James Jenkins. That night, the darkness outside matched Adam's mood as he finished the last drops of bourbon. The following morning, he awoke to a pounding headache and the sight of a TV crew filming a locksmith changing the locks on his house. Once the locks were replaced, Adam added no trespassing signs to every side of the property. His message was clear. 2 hours later, police apprehended Linda Jenkins, asleep in her car just a few blocks from Abigail's apartment. She surrendered without resistance. Meanwhile, Adam was nursing his hangover when a loud knock rattled his front door. "Go away," he shouted groggily. "It's the police," came the response. Reluctantly, Adam opened the door, his disheveled appearance matching his mood. "Mr. Erickson," one of the officers began, "your fiancée wants to come home to explain what happened." Adam's laugh was humorless. "I don't have a fiancée," he said flatly. "And this isn't her home." He pointed toward the squad car parked outside. "This is my home. It will never be hers. Please take her away before I do something I'll regret." Stepping onto the porch, he gestured toward the garbage bags. "That's all of her stuff. I'd appreciate it if you let her know I will never forgive her and will never speak to her again. Not now, not ever." From the squad car, Abigail's voice rang out, shrill and desperate. "Adam, I love you." He slammed the door, cranked up the TV volume, and settled on an old black-and-white western. He wasn't in the mood to listen to anything but the comforting drawl of the cowboy hero on screen. No one ever came forward to admit tipping off Linda Jenkins about the affair, but by Monday morning, James's secretary arrived at work with a smug look that hinted she might have been involved. Abigail, on the other hand, had become a pariah. Fired before she could even set foot back in the office, she faced universal condemnation from friends and family alike. With James gone and Linda's legal team failing to argue temporary insanity, the company was sold to a Chinese investor. The new owner wasted no time moving operations to a remote island, laying off the entire staff. Abigail's disgrace was complete. The day after she testified in court, she packed her belongings into her car and left town, hoping to start over. On her way out, she drove past Adam's house one last time, only to see a sold sign slapped across the for sale post in the front yard. Tears blurred her vision, forcing her to pull over. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, her mind replaying memories of Adam's arms around her. She closed her eyes, wishing she were dead. 6 years passed. Adam returned to his hometown for the funeral of a childhood friend, a local hero who had died in Iraq. Word spread through the Alumni Association, drawing a large crowd for the service. It was Adam's first time back since that fateful night. His wife, Ella, known as Brooke, walked beside him, her hand resting on his arm. 8 months pregnant, she gave his hand a reassuring squeeze as he gave her a walking tour of the town square. She knew every step was a reminder of painful memories and tightened her grip to anchor him. Their 3-year-old son, Adam Jr., was less interested in his parents' slow pace. Like any energetic boy his age, he darted ahead, eager to explore. As his parents paused to admire the display in an antique shop window, Adam Jr. bolted off without looking and collided with a woman leaving a nearby store. The woman staggered back, dropping her shopping bag. Several items spilled onto the sidewalk, including a condolence card. "Adam Robert Erickson, stop moving this instant." Brooke's voice rang out, sharp and motherly. Hearing the name sent a chill up the woman's spine. She froze, her heart pounding as she processed what she'd just heard. Brooke rushed over, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry," she said, reaching down to help pick up the woman's belongings. The woman looked up slowly, her face pale, her eyes meeting Adam's. The past had just caught up with them. "We've been in the car for 6 hours," Brooke said with a tired smile, "and he's got way too much energy to just walk calmly now." Adam Jr. took a step toward the woman, his little face full of sincerity. Without any prompting, he said, "I'm sorry I ran into you, lady, and made you cry. Are you okay?" The woman's lips quivered, and she blinked back tears. "I'm fine," she said softly, her voice shaky but kind. "Your son is a very well-mannered little gentleman. You should be so proud of him." Brooke smiled warmly, her motherly pride shining through. "Thank you," she replied, though concern flickered in her eyes as she glanced at the woman's pale face. Meanwhile, Adam Sr. knelt down to pick up the fallen bag. As he did, his eyes landed on her face, and recognition hit him like a freight train. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Neither of them said a word as they stared at each other. Even as Adam Jr. picked up a stray ink pen and handed it back to her, his father remained silent. True to the promise he had made years ago, Adam Sr. wordlessly handed the bag back to her. His hand trembled slightly, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were glistening with tears. Brooke noticed immediately. Her heart sank as she pieced it together, realizing who this woman had to be. Like a lioness guarding her family, she stepped protectively in front of her husband, cutting off the connection between him and the ghost from his past. "Get away from my family," Brooke said, her voice low and steady, yet full of authority. Her piercing glare dared the woman to say a single word. Abigail's shoulders slumped, her head dipping as she turned to leave. But before she could disappear, Brooke's voice rang out one last time, "Never is forever, cheating woman." Abigail flinched at the words, as though they had physically struck her. Without looking back, she quickened her pace and vanished into the crowd.